Hello there, folks, and welcome to the stream. My name is Mike D'Angelo, aka that Tellest guy. I'm waiting for sound to come out of that phone. I'm joined here today by my two co-hosts. We've got Rhianna over here, and then we've got Luna down there. Say hi, Luna. Say hi to the
How you
world.
doing that?
We are going to be talking Tellest today. Hello, Luna. You came up of your own volition. We're going to be talking Tellest today. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the strain, which is the kind of magical phenomenon that makes things work in the Tellest universe. So let me bring up my notes. How you doing, Rhianna? How was your day?
Hi, how you doing?
Hi.
I'm Rhianna. It was good. It was good.
You got some stinky breath.
She is a big stink.
You got stinks.
That's what it was. It wasn't a Luna fart. It was a Luna mouth burp.
Just a burp. Just had a burp.
Fat baby. Yeah, go.
So yeah, we're going to be talking about the strain. It's kind of like the fundamental piece of the Tellest universe, I think, because every fantasy universe has their magical systems and things like that. And for the most part, Tellest is kind of a little loosey goosey with his magic.
Yeah.
For the most part, there's no hard rules about anything. We want it to be a magical, fantastical place. So what we did was we introduced the strain, which is kind of like the fantasy universe equivalent of what you would have for the X-Men universe or something like that. I think it's the closest way to kind of put it. Is the strain typically will affect people by having some kind of magical pull over them, and it leads them to have random powers, just depending on random happenstance for the most part.
Is it random, or does it change by race and area and things like that?
Well, it does, and we'll get to that a little bit. But
spoilers.
So you mentioned, and we'll head to the origins of the strain a little bit. But you mentioned, is it random? And we've seen across a couple of different timelines at this point, the same people are getting powers. Typically, it's rare that you see someone who had a power in one timeline lose a power. I think we've only seen it happen once. It's typically, there's some kind of circumstance that's making it so that people get powers, or that they change powers, or something along those lines.
Right.
So we are going to talk about the origins of the strain, and I think to do that you have to go all the way back to the fall, which is the earliest chronological story that we have. Do I not have? I just have the little preview thing. There had to have been a picture here.
Of what?
Here, we'll go to the artwork instead. So The Fall is our earliest book that we have in the chronology, and it tells the story of Icarus Calatuil failing basically to stop a ritual from taking place that caused the fall. So the fall is kind of a double meaning. It's the fall of the island that Icarus lived on.
The floaty island.
Yeah, it was the floating continent of Chandronar, and it had the ability to fly because magic was so prominent in it.
In it.
I knew it. And the other thing was, it was basically the fall of magic itself, because the ritual was, we're going into spoiler territory for this. I hope people don't mind too much, but it's a fundamental piece of the Tellest universe, and it's important to get it out. The fall was the fall of magic, and it was basically an attempt to banish humanity from the world, and because the ritual failed, it ended up banishing magic as well. There's still little traces of it in Tellest, but it ends up breaking a lot of the continuity that magic had, and it doesn't really come back until thousands of years later with the Convergence, which is when Earth and Tellest reconvene into one world again. And at that point, the magic of the world has changed so much that you have the strain. So it used to be that, well, here, let's move into how it is passed on and is shared.
As Luna bites her toenails.
I wasn't sure what she was eating. It's okay if she's eating her toenails.
Makes grooming a little easier for us.
So we will just get into it. We'll kind of jump around for the documentation and everything. So the idea was that during the days of the fall, really the elves were the ones with innate magic. It was very rare for humans to have any kind of magic ability or anything like that that wasn't learned. And um, between like all the elves, they had the different tribes and everything like that, same as they do in the modern age of the Tellest universe. And they would share their powers, but there was no limitation. So like Icarus is part of a sect of elves that has the ability to summon ethereal wings to his back. So you can see that here in the background of the artwork. We have the Whisper Wind Elves, Vanathrin and Naralindra, who can whisper walk anywhere that they want, that they've been to on the planet, up to 2 times a day. But back in the olden times, they were able to do it whenever they wanted. Yeah. You know.
So more limitations, basically, with with the power. I guess, is that because it got diluted through the centuries, or just because of the...
So not only do I think that, and I'm saying this as someone who doesn't really know the answer.
There's certain things we haven't really gotten into, but...
So I feel like part of it is a lot of the magic got sapped away from them in the first place. Not all of it stayed in Tellest. We do know, based on like one very brief glimpse of Earth in the books, that there's some semblance of magic, and I think that's, if you're talking about like the canon of the Tellest universe, that's why we have, you know, magicians who seem to have a little bit more magic than they should in certain circumstances. And then when it's kind of like it was muted on Earth as well. And what ended up happening was, when, prior to the convergence, some event happens that causes basically a radioactive mess to happen. And that's what breaks down the veil between the two worlds. And that's what ignites the kind of arcane presence of magic again.
Right.
So at that point, instead of elves being the only ones to inherit their power back,
everybody gets an option.
Yeah. So
they're all signed up to an invisible genetic lottery situation. Because again, I'm asking because I don't know. If you have the strain, are you born with it, or is it something that you can develop based on your environment? Or...
I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I think for the most part, because we are kind of presenting it as an X-Men sort of situation.
Yeah. And I think I don't remember if a specific character did it, but I think you can like have power awaken later, like it's dormant until a certain point.
Right, exactly. So it very well could be that it's a little bit, we have in here how it's passed on and how it's shared. There's a better chance that if a ancestor of yours had the strain, you're going to be able to develop it. Now, it doesn't always happen like that. We do have people who've generation skipped. Exactly.
Recessive.
And shame for all of them.
Genetic mutation.
Right. So we do have like a couple of people who we've seen in the Tellest universe. I'm not going to talk about too many of them now because they're in alternate timelines. They spoil things a little bit. Twins act a certain way and things like that. They'll typically have the same power or a very similar permutation of that power. Hello. We have 2 characters who we've had art done for, but they've yet to come into any of the stories, and that's Shiro and her grandson John, and they both have the ability to do a summoning or a creation of celestial glass, and it generation hopped. Shiro's daughter did not have that ability. Is that a burp?
Yeah, that was a big burp.
Thank you for keeping your mouth closed for that one.
That would have been extra stinky.
Look at that dorsal fin. Can we see on camera? Yeah, you can absolutely.
Bit. Look at that big old
dorsal fin. You Parasaurolophus, what you doing?
She has a shepherd face, but a pity head.
Nope. What a pity.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Oh,
thank you.
kisses.
They're always stinky kisses. Hey yo.
Do you not want us to talk about the strain? Are you not a mutant, or are you definitely a mutant?
She's definitely a mutant. Oh, God. So how it's passed on and how it's shared. Oop, are we dancing now? How about we just cool it a little bit? How about we cool it? Mwah. We need a babysitter for you on Monday nights.
I know, right?
we talked about how it's shared a little bit with the elves earlier. Now the problem is there are limitations for the elves. They have the
She's okay. I don't think she stepped on anything.
stepping on everything.
Oh,
There goes my switch.
Okay.
Stomped all over my switch. um, Oops.
Don't mind me. Just...
Very professional stream that we've got going on. So yeah, the elves of this age, they share all their powers. Typically what's happening is if you are in a smaller sect, you have more control over your power, but the more elves that are in a tribe, they don't have the ability to regulate their powers to a safe degree. So if you're what's the problem over here?
Continue.
I don't think that I can with all your giggles. Hey, Luna. She's licking light bulb fixtures. Luna, come on down, okay? I'm gonna grab you. And hopefully. Sit right there. Sit.
Cool.
Sit.
Good, good baby. You stay.
Okay. Do you know what I said? Not at all, right?
No, I was distracted by Luna. Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
Hi, baby. She's
Luna, it's okay. Relax. Relax. This isn't the Luna show.
I want to
Luna
be...
show is
It
when
should be the Luna show.
you've got so many TikToks. All right, let me do it. What?
What do you want? Relax. It's okay.
Down.
We'll be done in a little bit. Let us get through professionalism. This is the kind of stuff that would be edited out, but we don't edit. So
No,
if you ever
not
want
at
to
all.
see it again, it'll be on YouTube.
So yeah, the elves of Tellest, now they have
Limitations on their powers. I
But-
did hear you. What?
that was from like 5 minutes earlier. The issue is that their powers are shared.
Mhm.
That's the limitation, and the sharing amount is dependent on how many members there are in the tribe. So if you're part of a smaller tribe, you have more control over your powers.
Right.
If you're part of a larger tribe,
It's more dispersed.
right, which means that an elf like Icarus can't be lackadaisical with his powers. He can't fly all the way up there and risk losing his access to his wings.
Stupid question. We didn't really go over this, but I just thought about it because we have like some artwork up. Does the power itself in your mind have like a visual aura, and like does it change color based on the type of power? Just a random, just interested kind of question, because some art has like the, you know, if like they're evil, it's purpley or...
Well, yeah, I mean, we've seen in some cases, like when people harness the arcane, like Juramentado has magical powers that kind of represents with like a purple energy.
Right.
And we've seen, you know, ice magic typically will manifest with a blue energy, and fire magic with a red energy and stuff like that.
So with
But the strain
elves-
itself... Go ahead.
So with the elves, would it be like, if someone were able to see the strain, would it just be kind of like an aura within them, or...
I kind of feel like it's not a colored aura when it's something like the strain, because typically, like, if you're looking at somebody casting like the regular magic that we see, unless it's got some kind of elemental properties, you're not usually see a lot of our characters are we go very wrong with the way that we present our characters, because everything about the Tellest universe is done the wrong way. Like, Marvel made very aesthetically pleasing characters with visually bombastic powers and things like that, and my characters are usually like very intellectual and stuff like that. And
But that's also interesting, because you have like, you know, you have your visually aesthetic heroes, and then you have the people who have like a more complex, like maybe the power's not so over the top, but it serves them better within their
it allows them to
job or
be a little bit
function.
more secret with things like
Yeah.
that. And I think when you're talking about like X-Men, it had to be in your face with certain things, because you're supposed to think, I'm looking right at this person, they're different than me, and it's supposed to be a topic of discussion.
Otherness.
Right. Whereas with the way that we present in the Tellest universe is a little bit more clandestine, and for better or worse. To your point, the aura, I don't think is a specific color based on whatever magic. I think it's kind of, I imagine it like a more rainbow, you know, what is it, coalescent?
Or iridescent.
Yeah, I suppose there's a couple of different ways that it can be described, but it's kind of like in my mind like an aurora borealis.
Ooh, pretty.
But like beyond mortal wavelength,
Right.
like you can't actually see those kind of things.
Got it.
So,
Cool.
so let's see, what's our next question? So we'll talk about some of the characters. So let me jump back into the regular recording, and we'll jump around a little bit. The last week that we were talking about stuff, what was last week? Last week was the April Fools?
Yes.
So we talked about Bixby. So Bixby is one of our more popular characters. He obviously has a strain that is very, very unique in that he can die and keep on dying. His strain is very much not magic. There's another question that you asked, which was, do wizards and witches, is their strain just the ability to cast magic? And Bixby is your perfect example of no, that's not necessarily true, because he has the strain
and
he's
magic.
trained to understand the arcane arts and stuff like that. I think the strain kind of probably allows magic to happen as kind of like a backbone, a foundation of magic, but it's not what bestows, they're not, wizards and witches are not.
You can be a regular normie and still do magic.
Right. Yeah, you're more trained at that point. But then another aspect would be Adelia has kind of both. She has the ability to cast the magic that she's learned from her ancestors, but she's still learning from Gaston to better hone and everything like that. And I would imagine that in one of the timelines, it was likely that she had an ability that was not ancestral magic or ancestral recall or anything like that, and she learned regularly. So. Let's see. We've got some other visually pleasing ones. Let's take a look at Adelia real quick, just because we don't you dare. So Adelia is our flagship character now. I just realized, I guess the artwork for Wild Magic we didn't put together yet on the website, because we're out to like 2025. Yeah, Adelia is definitely one of our fan favorite characters. She's our flagship character at this point. Even showing up in other materials and stuff like that. Let's go to Renault. I don't think that we have art for Renault up on the website because he's so far out. Which is a shame, because he's one of the visually appealing ones. He's got, we definitely kind of point to other heroes from other productions that we like. And he is very much our Spider-Man, because he has... We were talking about the Aurora Borealis earlier. He has whips that he can create, like electric current, like ribbons of electricity that he can summon out of the ether. And
I didn't think about, like, I knew that they were whips, but I didn't think about it, and I was just thinking of Jack the Whipper.
Well, now we have someone who can play him. But he has to have the mustache.
Absolutely, the tiny little thin mustache. Yep.
We talked about the way that it presents and the way that it's achieved and stuff like that. I think it's interesting to talk about Luca Cregan, because across 3 different origins now, we've seen different powers develop for him. Right. One of them in the book that shall not be named. But back then...
The early draft.
Back then, he was a speedster. And... Wait... Was it? No. The speedster thing was a bonus that he got from an artifact. He had the gift of
precognition.
Was it speeding? I think it might have been speeding. It was speeding, then precognition, and now he's got magic sense.
So he could tell the future and run toward it really quickly.
Right. 3 different versions of them. Whenever we do the multiverse of Tellest, it'll be fun to see all 3 versions of that come together. We've also got Kelvin Dracos, who he's had 2 different versions that we've seen. In the original timeline, he had the ability, he was basically our Wolverine with no real sense of being Wolverine, because he didn't have claws or anything like that. And he ended up with an artifact called the Spectrum, which was... That's kind of funny now. He ended up with an artifact called the Spectrum, which was a bow that shot rainbow-colored arrows whenever a projectile was launched from it. And when he would draw on the bowstring, it would enhance his vision. the funny thing now is that in the current timeline, he's naturally got that kind of radioscopic vision where
like
he can...
The eagle eyes, essentially.
Right, so he can hone in on that. So the question that I posed to myself was, did the new timeline somehow know about his power in the previous timeline and give him that power? Was there some semblance of why that happened, or was it just random happenstance? And then we've got Shiro, who we talked about before. We do have multiple times that I could have stopped and shown off some of these characters. Let's see if we can find a Kelvin. So here's an early Kelvin. A couple of these Kelvins will show off. AKA Steel Tip with his green hair.
Yeah, he does have a little green hair.
Just in that picture, though. So there's our Kelvins across the timelines. And then we did mention Shiro. Let's see if I can't find her. I've got, I think, just the one artwork for Shiro so far. There might be two, but I think the second one isn't out yet. So this is Shiro creating her celestial glass. Her grandson, we have art for him, but again, probably like late 2024 before it'll grace the Tellest website. And let's see, we got Nadia, who's another one who could be visually appealing if we actually showed her in motion. Are you familiar with Nadia? It's been a long time.
She walks on sand.
she's the desert wraith.
Oh yeah.
So her whole ability is that she's a speedster, and as she runs, she becomes more and more insubstantial to the point where she will appear to be a specter, darting across the sands of Savion. So she's in roughly the same area as Kayonani, and we were going
Friends
to
one day.
Of course.
Yeah.
In the event stories that bring all the characters together, definitely, because they're in the same area. I started writing her story. You and I have talked about the story. We know where it's going to go and everything like that. It's just there's 10 other stories that I'm telling. So we have to definitely see if we can get back to that. You've got like a way back here dimple. Cool. So we talked a little bit about the Strain's presentation on the elves. That it didn't give them powers, but it kind of restored the powers that they had with some limitations. That technically it might have been the Strain way back then, but because the presence of magic has changed so much, it does it really qualify as the same phenomenon, or is it something new now?
Yeah, because it is. Well, wait. It's got to be something inherited because you have like half elven characters, but that mutates the strain even further if there's.
They certainly received something back. It's not like when the strain came back they got any powers that are different than the ones that they had. So that's one semblance of it, because even within the tribes nothing new happened, and furthermore, elves will not get a second power. You'll notice that like none of the elves have their tribe's power and have inherited something else. To your point, the half elves in some cases will get a power. There's a rule set for half elves that's different than many other races. So the elves, they kind of feel the concept of the strain as called as such more than anybody else, because they're the only ones who've really been punished by this thing.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, you can have a regular character who is human, gnome, dwarf, who never develops any power.
Right.
Every elf has some kind of power, so they have some kind of power set that increases the likelihood of them to be able to do something cool on a day-to-day basis.
And I know this happened at least once, but if you have, like, let's say the power that you manifest is different from the rest of your tribe, don't they kick you out to start your own tribe, essentially?
As a dwarf. So the elves and the dwarves are different in that regard. Okay. The elves don't have the opportunity. There's never been on record an elf that's developed a power that's different than their tribe.
Okay.
We'll hit the dwarves in just a second. But the elves, the half-elves, the situation with that is a half-elf will generally, more often than not inherit the powers of, whatever their elven parent is.
Okay.
There are very rare occasions where a half-elf does get their parent's power. And in that case, it's not a limitation. It's they have the full power. So they're ostracized for either reason. Either they don't have a power at all, or all the people from their tribe are jealous. Number one, you fraternized with someone outside your race, which
for elves doesn't work out.
For
so
elves doesn't
good.
work out so well because historically they're a little bit racist.
We'll say that they have a like such a strong culture and history that it's like frowned upon in general, just to make it a little less frowned upon.
Contemporary? You mean? No, it's very much supposed to be that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Tellest is by its nature.
They're old fashioned.
Yeah, it's
because they were the first ones, really.
Right. Well, I mean, and even in contemporary times, there are definitely places. Like we like to paint the picture of humans as being, more worldly and open and welcoming and things like that. It's not like that all over the place.
And the fun thing about Tellest too is you have different, like you have the Minotaurs, you have Naga, you have the dwarves, the elves,
Kajas, Rhinotors, Gnolls.
You have all of these characters that look very different, but despite that background, they all do have very human attributes. Like they are complex, like humans are. So it's not really, you don't have like like Minotaurs are evil and that's that. Like it's not so cookie cutter.
We do have, just for the nature of like the people who like the Horde versus Alliance kind of perspective, we do have the goodly races and the evil races, but really like we've run into so many characters that fit outside of that box.
And it also depends on where they choose to live, because some areas are more like exclusionary and then other areas are more like conglomerates of different races.
Right. Like one of the things is like the Gnolls are part of like the historically evil races, but in the new timeline there's an alliance between the Gnolls, the Kaja, and the kobolds, and they bring that alliance from Waris, which is where most of the anthropomorphic races live, to Adelatha, which is like our hub world in the Tellest universe.
Right.
So you've got Adelatha, which is this very open-minded city, but you also have places like Ippius, where like the only characters that you see in that entire first book in Silver Serpent are humans, with the exception of like a mention of Icarus here and there. So for half-elves, they definitely get the short end of the stick no matter what happens, because they're ostracized from elven society almost exclusively.
Right.
And then there's different kinds of half-elves too, because we've seen human half-elves in certain circumstances, and then in D. April's Fools, which we were talking about last week, there's gnome half-elves, and they have an aberration of the strain. So we know like bits and pieces of certain races, but like we really haven't explored too many outside the box when it comes to like Logano, Minotaurs, Rhinotors, Gnolls, Kaja. Like we try to establish some kind of like interesting rule to things, but we don't have all the answers yet.
I did have a question though about the elves. So if somebody, let's say we talked about them being ostracized from their tribe, but what if they decide to leave? Do they have their power revoked somehow?
Nope. No, because the elves wouldn't have anything to do with that.
Okay.
And the strain, and the strain isn't going to be like, well, you left your tribe, But we did mention earlier that the idea of the elves is they have the power kind of constrains based on the number of elves that there are in whatever tribe. So in theory, if Icarus was the last elf of his kind, he would again be able to indefinitely have the wings on his back. And we've explored some of that before, because we have an elf Faradorn, who he would be a little bit lower on this picture list.
That's so interesting if you have like a battle between elven tribes. Like if they, like there's not really power
as the fight is...
like because the more people die, the more powerful the remaining people get.
Right.
That's cool.
If you were having an elven war between two tribes in the modern age of Tellest, and they were like, "This is it. we're fighting to the death." Technically, the power scheme would keep on zigzagging, because
it's like Darwinism on crack.
Right.
Because you're literally getting rid of the weaker ones, and the stronger get stronger.
Right.
Ooh, we gotta write that somehow. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, so
Stay tuned, people.
write that story, Rhianna. I don't have the time. So on the screen now we have Faradorn, who is one of the elves that we've seen in the Awake series. He is the last of his kind, so he does not have any limitations on his power.
He looks happy about it.
He does. I'm the last elf. I've got all the power. So I think part of the inspiration for this concept was honestly the movie The One. I don't know if you remember watching it, the Jet Li movie.
Yeah, you told. Well, I don't know if we watched it or if I watched it and forgot because I'm a goldfish, but I do remember the premise. It's
Right.
like him across the multiverse. Yeah, basically like finding himself.
Right, and then as he culls the other members of, the multiverse that represent him, his powers grow, as do other members of, the multiverse. So he ends up running into like the only remaining one who has some kind of combat training, who has the ability to put up a fight against him, and they're obviously superheroes at this point because everybody else has been cut down. So
that's fun.
Yep. So what fun. So you had mentioned the ostracizing of people from society or voluntarily leaving, stuff like that. In Dwarven society, the way that it works is, in theory, the same way as it works for humankind. It's just a cultural shift. It's a human could get a power, and they could go about their day like normal. The person next to them might be upset that they have a power. They might think that it's scary that they have that power, so forth and so on. But typically, nothing within their culture is going to push things in one direction or another.
Right.
Dwarven kind across all of Tellest has kind of an established rule that leadership is given based on the presentation of the strain. So, if you are part of a Dwarven clan that your king was able to summon blizzards or something like that, you would be Dwarfy McColdbreath or something like that. Something stupid like
King
that.
McBlizzard.
McBlizzard. McFlurry.
McFlurry.
So you definitely have something like that where all the rest of the clan would take that surname, sort of like clan name. And thank you. You can hear my voice rasping. But the problem is, if someone else in that clan develops power, they are required, they are duty bound to leave the clan and start their own clan. Now typically that means that other people in the clan that they currently lived in are going to leave with them. It's very rare for somebody to be like, all right, you're off on your own, goodbye, forget you. It's supposed to be a thing of honor, not a thing of of being ostracized or anything like
you're
that.
Now the king of your own peoples or whatever it is.
Right, and it's an aspirational goal in some ways. It's not meant to punish, although certainly in the modern age, having this sense of community and then having to leave that presents as a punishment. So like we briefly saw in the Third Child of the Stars book, when Miter Cold Whistle gets his power and becomes Miter Earthshaker, he's like, nope, wasn't me. I don't know what caused the walls to crumble and break. Nowhere. So
not me.
There was a question on your mind.
It might be gone now. Oh, what happens if they present the strain as like an infant, like very, very early?
For dwarves?
Yeah.
So I don't know that the dwarves have ever presented with that in mind. At least not in any of the stories that I've written.
Yeah.
And I think that might be wow. That might be a kind of product of their long-lived age. Because the only other races besides dwarves that live long in the Tellest universe typically are the elves. I think the gnomes probably a little bit on the higher side, but most of the other races are pretty low on the list. Goblins might be another, because the rumor is that goblins are just elves from another universe, basically.
Sorry, she's getting more and more pathetic as she whines. She started from like this, then this, now she's this way.
And we don't care in the slightest.
She's so sideways.
So we've been doing a lot of talking about characters and races and stuff like that. But the strain doesn't just affect people; it also affects places. Like we've seen in the Mageborn books, we've seen Folly's Glen, which is an enchanted forest, basically. That shush. It definitely acts very different compared to many other places that we've seen in the Tellest universe. We had water that showed up from basically the trunk of one tree, flowed to another trunk, and then just disappeared. There's no sense for why that should happen. There were things that were abnormal, that grew abnormally large as a product of being in Folly's Glen. There are, plants and herbs across Tellest that have just naturally absorbed that power and have grown to biologically have those kind of traits and everything like that. So like we have been doing with Stephen Belshaw, like a small mix of things from the Mageborn series, because typically she's our lead alchemist so far. She's the one who we've seen play with a lot of herbs and things like that when she's trying to make potions and things like that.
If somebody consumed enough of a plant that had the strain, would they get the strain?
They might have like a side effect. I don't think that they would absorb the strain itself.
It doesn't change their genetic material, but it could grant them temporary powers, perhaps? Maybe?
Perhaps to some extent. I mean, you figure the idea of mixing components, that the plants themselves don't really have the strain quite the way that people do. It's just they've absorbed enough of the arcane power that they have certain properties. So it's not like you're absorbing the strain, you're just absorbing the arcane
power.
Yeah, whatever the influx is. Now on the screen, you should be able to see a couple of our artifacts. Most of these are crafted with mortal arcane influence, but every now and then you'll see one that isn't. So like the Sepulchre's Claw, it was a piece of, I can't remember the tree that it was originally fashioned from. It was just a wooden dowel, and it ended up in the Tomb of Fleeting Souls outside of Foster Villa, where it absorbed enough energy to actually become vampiric.
It's fun.
Southeast of that, we've got the Veil of Mists, which is a man-made cloak that absorbed power from the Valley of Mists and ended up becoming basically our Cloak of Invisibility, or as we call it,
Imbibity.
Thank you. And then there's one
I was
other.
gonna say, honestly, the first thing that came to mind was Tellest Fashion Week.
Fashion Week.
I don't know why.
Good times, you. We also have, this has never shown up in any of the stories or anything yet, but
It goes along with Fashion Week.
It does. Hudorian's Boots, which grants people the ability to walk on water and things like that. We've got, this really is probably, I don't know if this is mortal crafted or not, but this is the Crown of Elven Kings. We talked earlier about the way that the elves have to share their power. This is one ability that allows an elf to use the power of all of their tribe without having to kill those tribe members.
Well, that's lovely.
Let's see. But I can't reveal all the secrets. There's other things on here that were naturally made as well.
I'm going to duck out of sight a little bit just to give her some attention.
Some
Because
love?
I can't, as a dog mom, I can't.
Well, I'll tell you
listen to
what.
her whine.
Let's take a minute. We'll go on intermission. We'll both love on Momo. So as it turns out, we were actually very close to wrapping up with everything that we needed to talk about.
And Luna has made it so that we have no choice.
Right. So one of the things that we had left to talk about was how races and cultures, and kingdoms being the prominent place of that, view the strain, and we've got How about you duck out downstairs and I'll wrap this up?
Bye, people.
Bye. See you, Luna.
Bye, everybody.
So I'll talk directly to you, the camera.
I can't go down the stairs if you don't.
Bye. Thank you. Did you just throw her in the hamper?
No, I set her down gently in the hamper. Bye. I miss you.
Yep. So we talked about races. We talked about very briefly cultures, but the other thing is kingdoms. And while Rally has been typically pretty open with a lot of people, Black Lane, we know from the April Fools, is very anti. Everything that's going on with the strain. They're rounding people up who have the strain. Anyone who has magic in general is kind of at risk, but specifically people who have powers that they can't usually control on their own, they're shipped off to Ariskana, which is the fortress of the Ebon Hammer, who try and make sure that they, don't let any of these people out of their sight or anything like that. I think that might have wrapped us up, because the only other thing was, again, do wizards and witches and spellcasters have the strain? And that was one of the very first things that we talked about. Let me shift this to this screen over here, because there is one other thing that I wanted to talk about today before I close up. In less than 12 hours, probably, we are going to be launching our newest Kickstarter. This is our 5th Kickstarter, I think it is. And we are going to be launching a Kickstarter for our... Where did my darn thing go? I thought that I had a link. I must have deleted it by accident. Anyway, we are running a Kickstarter for 50 D&D maps, and I'm going to show you a link, a preview of what we've got going on. So again, it starts tomorrow. We're trying to make this very affordable for people, so we're only asking for $400. I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to get to that relatively quickly. The thing that we're offering is 50 plus battle maps, but in addition to that, we're offering the 167 variants that we have as well. So just on the screen, you'll briefly see, I think, like 15 maps or so. So you're seeing a good chunk of what we have. It's not 15, it's like 10. Still a good chunk of what we have on offer. You don't see any of the variants or anything like that. We also have a couple of add-ons that we're showing off. So we've got the 100 fantasy writing prompts, which released earlier this month. We've got the entire pack of Tellest Pros, which you can get for a very low price, specifically through this Kickstarter. We've got the Tellest Visions art book, and then we also have the Quantum Quest game, which was previously kickstarted here on this platform. So we will be looking to have that go live around 6:30, 7 o'clock tomorrow, and then we're going to try and push to get to that 400 amount as quick as possible. And then after that, we'll start to talk about things like stretch goals and things like that. Matt and I have some pretty good ideas about which direction we want to go for stretch goals, and then if we keep on rolling things out, we're going to expand on that as well. But you can hear my voice is starting to go. So we're going to use this opportunity to say goodbye. So let's go to our show closing page. So folks, on the screen right now, you're going to be able to see a couple of things that we've got that will bring you to the world of Tellest. Most notably the website. You can go to tellest.com. That brings you to where we've been looking at for the most of this this chat today. And you'll be able to see all of the projects. It's kind of like our link tree. Excuse me. Then for any of our premium digital content, typically that's where you want to go to Patreon for, because you'll be able to see on patreon.com/Tellest the sticker club, the bookmark club, the maps that we make, art posts a couple of times a week. I've fallen a little bit behind on that because of the Kickstarter, but we're going to be resuming that later this week. If you want to see these videos after Twitch purges them from the platform, you can see that always on youtube.com/@worldofTellest. But if you want to see things live like you did tonight, you'd be able to do that at twitch.tv/thattellestguy. And then for all of our premium physical goods, the best place to do that is you got to go to tellest.etsy.com. That's where we have our mouse pads, our posters, our bookmarks, our stickers, autographed copies of the books, and our most premium item is definitely Rhianna's Weird Witch wands. Those are fantastic. You can also find out a little bit more information about that on her TikTok channel, Weird Witch Wands, and she spells it WYRD. And then there's a second TikTok channel that you should really check out as well, and that is Tales of Tellest. That's for Luna, our little nut, and the other two dogs that we have downstairs. And that is Tales, Tails of Tellest. So before my voice completely drops off, let me just say thank you again for joining us. I don't know that Rhianna is going to ask this, but I would love a chalky milk. And thank you again for joining. I'll see you next time, and I miss you.